Hello, and welcome to today's second session of the 2020 Asian American Women in Tech Webinar Series. Meet the Asian millennial in tech, a new breed of entrepreneurs. I would now like to introduce your moderator for today, Jing Lee. Jing, you now have the floor.
Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's exciting webinar session. Our session today is hosted by the Asian American Business Development Center. The Asian American Business Development Center is a nonprofit organization which was established back in 1994. It assists Asian American businesses in strengthening their capacity to compete in the mainstream market, to expand business opportunities, and to promote recognition of Asian American businesses' contributions to the general economy. I want to thank the series partner Cisco and also highlight that the series is sponsored by Bank of America, Hennessy, and JP Morgan Chase & Company. As David mentioned, this is the second webinar in our Asian American Women in Tech series. The third webinar is scheduled on October 28th with the theme of The Evolution of Technology Continues. What is the future of technology in 2025? Today we will hear from three powerful Asian American female entrepreneurs who will share their experience launching new businesses, navigating challenges in the VC world, along with advice for building an entrepreneurial mindset, and more. My name is Jing Lee, and I'm from Accenture. I lead strategy and innovation within Accenture Technology, and I'm excited to be your moderator here today. First, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Reshma Sojani. She's the founder and CEO of Girls Who Code, the author of Brave, Not Perfect, which you may know from the viral TED Talk. So Reshma, over to you.
This is so amazing to be here with such incredible Asian American women who are doing awesome things as startup founders and then leading innovation and strategy. So I'm so excited to be talking to everybody. I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about what failure means to me, because I think that if you're going to start an organization or start a company or be an entrepreneur, you have to embrace failure. And definitely growing up as an Asian American woman, as an immigrant, a daughter of immigrants, that was really hard for me. My parents came here as refugees from Uganda in 1973. Both of my parents were trained engineers, and that was the only reason why they got status to come to this country. Even though my father worked as a machinist in a plant, and my mother sold cosmetics. And from the time I was a little girl, my dad would always read to me about these amazing leaders like Mahatma Gandhi and Eleanor Roosevelt. And I knew that I wanted to do that. I knew that I wanted to do something that would make a difference and literally give back to this country that had saved my parents' life. I graduated college and law school and grad school with $300,000 in student loan debt. I did what every Midwest girl thinks she should do. I moved to New York City. I got a job at one of those fancy law firms, and I thought, I'll pay off those loans in a year or two, and then I can go do what I'm really meant to do. Well, that was pretty naive of me because it took me, I'm still paying off those loans. But 10 years later, I found myself working as a corporate lawyer in finance in a job I hated and I didn't want. And I was 33 years old, and I kept thinking to myself, is this it? Is this the rest of my life? And I remember sitting there one day in this windowless conference room when my phone rang, and it was my best friend. And it's funny how your best friend always calls you when your life is falling apart. But I heard her, through my tears, just say two simple words: just quit. There was nothing profound about what Deepa said. She literally just said, just quit. But there was something about hearing those words at that moment in my life that gave me the courage to do it. So I quit. And at age 33, I decided to run for United States Congress right here in New York City against an 18-year incumbent because I thought that was a great idea. I literally thought I could shake every hand and meet every voter. I remember the only thing my friends and I knew how to do was build a website, and we built one. And we raised $50,000 from Indian aunties that were just so happy that an Indian girl was running her office. But it was the best 10 months of my life. And I swore that I was going to win. And on election day, as I sat there holding my dad's hand, watching those returns come in, that little ticker was not moving past 19% of the vote. I had lost. I had lost spectacularly. I was broke. I was humiliated. I had pissed off the entire Democratic establishment, and I literally had no contingency plan. But the thing that I had thought about that next morning when I woke up, the big aha moment that I had was I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm not broken. I'm not broken. See, I had thought for so long in my life that if I tried something and I failed, that it would literally break me. And I literally tried my biggest dream, the thing that since I was 13 years old, I had been waiting to do, and that didn't break me. So it was this aha moment for me of like, what are the other things that I've told myself that I cannot do? Where are the other times that I gave up before I even tried? And it was the beginning for me of living my life brave, not perfect. And quite frankly, it's what gave me the courage to start Girls Who Code, an organization to teach girls to code when I did not code. And I didn't even bother to learn. I had an idea. I had a passion. And I had an idea that I wanted to help other girls like me march up into the middle class by learning technology. And that is like the secret for a lot of entrepreneurs who are listening today. Like, I think that many of us think that we have to become experts in a topic. And when we have our expertise, then we'll be ready to launch that business or start that company. And that is actually false. You don't need expertise, you need passion. The expertise part, you hire people who are smarter than you, which I do all day long. And so for me, it was about the passion of basically solving this problem where, if you talk to any CEO in the world, they'll tell you my number one problem is I can't find enough engineers. We have over 500,000 jobs. And if there's one thing that we've learned from this global health crisis is that every day another industry is becoming automated. And what we thought was going to take 10 years literally took 6 months. So the need to learn how to code, the need to be technical, the need to have the language of computational thinking for all of our kids, but in particular our women, is more important than it's ever been, especially at a moment where 40% of our breadwinners are women. So I started Girls Who Code as an experiment. I borrowed a friend's conference room. I handpicked my first 20 girls like a good community organizer. And I bought them pizza and I paid them $50 because I thought that they would all leave because it was summer and it was so nice outside. And what amazed me in the first couple of weeks was that I saw them wanting to build solutions to problems that mattered. I saw them building tools to help undocumented students. And I saw them building algorithms to help their parents who were sick with cancer. I saw them after Sandy building tools for entrepreneurs and bodegas in Queens. And I realized that, even though I didn't win on that journey to Congress, that maybe I could teach a generation of young women who could make this world a better place. And that's what I did. And so in the past 8 years, we've taught over 300,000 girls to computer program. We've reached over 500 million. Accenture has been one of our awesomest partners, and I'm so excited. And when I heard where you're working at right now, and we have over 400 clubs here at Girls Who Code, and after the coronavirus happened, we immediately pivoted to doing our programs virtually, and we taught 5,000 girls, half of which are under the poverty line, half of which are Black and Latinx. And so, we've built an incredible movement that, especially in this moment of division and divisiveness, I think it's creating a generation of girls who are going to be change makers, who are going to solve our biggest problems and our smallest problems. And they are simply going to heal and save us and make our world a better place. And so what I want to leave you with is a couple lessons, I think, from my book, Brave, Not Perfect, is, the biggest lesson of my life is to be brave, not perfect, is to kind of end my obsession with perfectionism, which I promise you was greatly enhanced by my Asian parents and my Asian upbringing, right? Where so many of us feel like we've been raised to just do it perfectly or not do it at all. And we've been taught to not take risks and to not fail and to kind of shrink ourselves and make us feel small and to just follow the rules. And I think that upbringing in many ways, which my parents raised me to protect me, has not always served me as a leader. And so it's something that I am in an ongoing struggle with unlearning. And part of unlearning that is, one, is to practice imperfection. There's no better place than to practice imperfection than in this global pandemic. I have a 9-month-old and a 5-year-old, and every day I am a hot mess. You know what I mean? Literally. Somebody's late for school. Somebody's interrupting my Zoom call. I forgot this or that. I am literally showing up, and what not is what is considered as my best self. But I'm doing my best in this moment, and I'm living authentically. And so in all ways that you can actually practice imperfection, do it. The second thing is solicit rejection and negative feedback. You know, I put myself out there at least once a month. And when I get rejected or something doesn't work out, most recently I applied to my community board and I couldn't get in. You know, on my community board in the education committee, something I know something about, I literally took that rejection letter and I posted it on my fridge. And every day it's a reminder to me, like, somebody can't tell me that I can't do something. I don't hide from rejection. I solicit it. I'm obsessed with athletes. And when I think about Serena Williams, she literally sits at the edge of her ability and a coach who's saying, do it again, do it again, do it again. That's the only way you become great, is by doing it again over and over and over again. Not in the pursuit of perfection, but in the pursuit of excellence. And finally, I am a big believer in living a life with no regrets. Even if things don't work out, I don't want to be one of those people who say shoulda, coulda, woulda. If I have a dream or a goal, if there's something that you want to do, you want to start a podcast, you want to start a business, you want to get out of that job that you're good at, but you just absolutely hate, quit, leave, start, begin, take one step. Because if one thing that we've learned over the past 8 months is life is way too short for any regrets. And I am a living example of, like, you never know what happens and what journey you get on, or what movement you can build, or what change you can make in the world if you don't try, and maybe even try and fail. So again, thank you so much. I love this community and I love everything you're doing. And thank you for inviting me and for giving me a couple of minutes to just share some of the things that I've learned. Thank you.
Thank you, Reshma. That was awesome. It's so inspiring to hear you share your story of how you just went after it and how you bring passion. So speaking of change makers and some of the women who are leading our next generation, now I would like to invite each of our 3 panelists to introduce themselves. We'll start off with Angie Chang.
Hi, my name is Angie Chang. I am the founder of Women 2.0 and Girl Geek X, which is formerly Bay Area Girl Geek Dinners, where we've hosted over 250 events over the past 12 plus years. I also spent some time at Hackbread Academy, where I led employer partnerships for the Women's Engineering School, where we were training adult women to become Python engineers in the Silicon Valley and get them hired. Thanks for inviting me to be here.
Do I introduce myself? Oh, hi. Hi, everybody. Hi, I'm Tiffany Pham. I'm excited to be here as well. I'm the founder and CEO of Mogul. I'm also the author of You Are Mogul and Girl Mogul, 2 best-selling books, and also a judge on the TLC TV show Girl Starter. And Mogul, just as a brief introduction, is currently the largest platform for diverse talent worldwide. We reach around 146 million worldwide, ultimately helping incredible diverse talent, women, minorities, people of color, to reach their goals, cultivate meaningful success, and ultimately unlock their greatest potential, thus unlocking the world's greatest potential. And that's our full vision as a company. We currently also provide HR technology solutions to over 480 Fortune 1000 clients, as well as many of the world's fastest growing companies, to then attract that talent into their workplaces, enhancing their diverse workforces by about 74.4% per year on average, through either our software solutions or our executive search services. And then thereafter, with all the revenues that we earn, we then partner with the United Nations and other international organizations worldwide to provide out free educational resources to millions of women and minorities globally. And they become a part of our ecosystem thereafter, and it completes a circular model for our global good for us in this way. And so I'm delighted to be here again and excited to share my journey.
Hi everyone, I'm Tiffany Zong. I'm 23 and the co-founder and CEO of Zebra IQ, where we help creators turn themselves into businesses. Also, prior to this, I worked at a $300 million VC firm when I was 18, full-time for a year and a half before leaving the venture world to start a company and also consult with Fortune 500 brands as a strategic advisor and consultant around all things Gen Z, youth trends, and internet trends.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be moderating this panel today with such a powerful group of Asian American women. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. We're excited to hear from our panel as well as you, the audience. Please use the WebEx Q&A function to post questions, which I'll be monitoring throughout the discussion. Additionally, we invite you to enjoy a flute performance at the end by Kazuko Miyoshi Stratman. Kazuko is a professional flutist who graduated from the Osaka College of Music and studied at the Tohogan Music School as a flute major. She has performed Japanese music a number of times throughout the country, such as opening for the Cherry Blossom Festival, the Kennedy Center, and the Performing Arts Center of Los Angeles. So at the end, if you have additional questions after the panel discussion, you can use the text box under the Q&A panel. Send your questions directly to any of us during the performance. So let's get started. The tech industry has historically faced tough gender and diversity challenges. While the percentage of women in the workforce has grown over time, the 5 largest tech companies, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, and Microsoft, only have a workforce of about 30% women. Accenture has publicly announced some bold goals for gender equality to achieve a gender-balanced workforce by 2025, and I'm proud to be part of that. We are working on cultivating our talent, including growing women in executive roles, building a culture of inclusion and diversity, which starts from hiring young leaders who can help drive change. So first, Angie, I'd love to hear more about your experience working in Silicon Valley startups and how that influenced your decision to promote more women in high-tech entrepreneurship, starting from Women 2.0, and how that led you to creating Girl Geek X.
Yeah, so let's see, where do I start? I actually graduated without a computer science degree, but I can also make my own website, as Reshma said. So I was working in Silicon Valley startups as the only female engineer in a team of about a dozen men who were great. But after a year of seeing them every day and being like, where's the other women? I had to go network. And I went to all these fun networking events where I heard about Car 2.0 website and this and that. And I was like, okay, this is very male focused. And I need to meet the other women in the Web 2.0 movement. So I created, with the help of some other women, Women 2.0, and we started doing a Women 2.0 conference, Women 2.0 meetups at my house in Palo Alto at the time. We were just buying, $2 chuck and putting out a plate of cheese, and like dozens of women from Google and startups would just come and we just share big ideas. And I also learned quickly that when I said things like young women, women would be like, no, I'm coming, I'm not young, so you got to change that. So we became Women 2.0. And we were really celebrating that we're all in tech and we're all networking. And I think there was a lack, this is like 2006. So there was a lack of women's networking events, which I know is not true now. But back then we were like the only women's event. So everyone would come and we had hundreds of women at our events. And then for Women 2.0, our goal was really to help high-growth, high-tech women's entrepreneurship. And for that end, we created a media company, which published the stories of aspiring women entrepreneurs, current women entrepreneurs, exited women entrepreneurs, and we really just created this platform to share so many stories where every week in your inbox you would see that there are women out there chasing their dreams, working hard, failing, not failing, just running the gamut. And I think those stories that you don't normally see were really appreciated by women who were working at bigger companies as well as women who wanted to start their own. And I started Women 2.0 as a side project. So I didn't quit my day job right away. I got to build up my audience, build this community. And then when a job went kaput, my day job, I could then take my side project full-time, which then I did. And then we did 1,000 Women Conference in San Francisco. So I think there is something to be said about trying new things and doing them on the side. I also then started Girl Geek Dinners, or Girl Geek X now it's called, because we have so many more products. X is a variable for podcasts, conferences, events. And the reason that I think these are so important for women and also girls is that they provide a place for people to come to that's outside of their normal swim lane. Like you're always like doing your thing that you're good at, but it's also really important, and I hear this all the time, for women to come together across industries, across departments, to break outside of your silo of I only talk to other women in product, or I only talk to other women who are doing this, because it's so valuable to have that synergy and those connections and that networking opportunity to help retain women in the long run to be executives, to be funded entrepreneurs. Because I really love the work that Girls Who Code is doing, and I love the work that people do for young girls, but I also strongly believe there's so much work and retention work to be done for women who are in industries, the 20 plus up to like 80. I get super excited when I see like a grandma at a Girl Geek dinner. I'm like, yes, we need more women starting companies later, and also celebrating their stories and networking them and making this all very normal. I don't want to go to an event where it's only 20-something speaking. I want to see a wide range of ages and also ethnicities. I think as Asian Americans, we're very well positioned to be advocates for our Black and Brown sisters and brothers. So I think it's really important. It's a great opportunity for us to be able to provide a diverse event series, and we do that here. And then also, I think, yeah, we're just through sharing stories and providing opportunities to inspire people, you can meet people who inspire you to do bigger, and also like help you think about how you may change your goalposts. And they may also help you understand the language of the time. So for many women who have, for example, never been working in tech, or maybe they've taken a break for caretaking and they want to swim back into tech, and they're like, how do I get started? They can come to our free events and meet other women and hear women talk about their jobs, and then network with them and the recruiters, and suddenly they have this warm connection to these jobs where previously they were just staring at the careers page of a big company going, how do I even get noticed? So I think we provide very valuable opportunities for women to succeed in the long run.
Thanks, Angie. I love that idea of like working together as women to help break out of silos and go across swim lanes. I think that's one of the key things in the power of innovation, is that cross-pollination. I also love how you said that, you're really encouraging women to start a company at any age, right? So last year, Stack Overflow did an annual developer survey of over 90,000 developers, and they found that while about 60% took an online course in programming or software development, 85% of developers just taught themselves a new language, a new framework, or a new tool set without ever taking a formal course. So Tiffany Pham, would love to hear from you. What led you to shift from your business background into becoming a software engineer? And how did that lead into building Mogul as a platform for diverse talent?
Thanks, Jane. Well, my story actually all begins with my family, my grandmother. She was this amazing mogul herself. She inspired me to ultimately follow in this journey that you just outlined later on, which I'll explain. So what happened was that my grandmother, again, she was this amazing woman, running newspapers, businesses across Asia. She was the first woman to drive a car in Vietnam, and an incredible maverick of her time. And because of what happened with the war, etc., then my family ultimately had to move to Paris, France, which is where I was born. And as a minority in France, my parents worried about me, that since I was a young Asian woman, that I might not have opportunities like those around me. So they started to fall in love increasingly with black and white movies from America, and thought maybe that's where they should go, where I could have more opportunities, where my siblings and I could have a better opportunity. And ultimately, therefore, at age 10, I ended up moving from Paris, France to Plano, Texas. And so when I was there, I ended up, of course, struggling because it was such a culture shock, and I didn't know how to speak English at the time. But at 10 years old, I started watching movies like Friends and I Love Lucy, and I could see for myself then, as I was learning how to speak English, how powerful media technology could be for learning and education. And I never forgot that feeling and experience. And then when I was just 14 years old, that's when the biggest shock of my life occurred, the most horrific day of my life, the day that my biggest role model in life, my grandmother, ended up passing away young. And that day that she unexpectedly passed away, I made a promise to her and myself that I would spend the rest of my life working towards the same goal and mission that she had had. Forever after, I was going to spend every waking moment from then on working towards the same goal, providing others with information, with opportunities as she had with her newspapers, with her businesses, always working to provide others in need with information and opportunities. So I promised I would dedicate my life towards the same mission and goal as well. And so ever since I was 14 years old, that's all I've ever worked towards. And now I'm 16. I'm just kidding. I know I look young, and so do all of us. It's part of our genes. But ultimately, when I was 16, I was thinking to myself, okay, what more could I do to be like my grandmother? And that's when I happened to watch a TV show, another one called Gilmore Girls. And in the show, Rory Gilmore, she was just like me, an introvert, studious, quiet, and all of a sudden she went off to Yale and she ran the school newspaper there just like my grandmother had run. So even though I didn't have the money to go visit Yale and to visit colleges in general, I thought to myself, maybe that's where I could go to be like my grandmother. And so I secretly ended up writing an application, a letter to Yale to ask if they would just give me the chance. I knew I could do this one day. I could start a company perhaps to follow my grandmother's footsteps. If just give me the chance. And after a couple of months of silence, I got back a letter from them that they were going to let me in on a full scholarship. So the first time I ever saw what a college looked like was my very first day of class at Yale. And thereafter, I ended up having, of course, continuing struggles as a shy person, as an introvert on campus. But I promised myself I had to be like my grandmother. I had to stand up for myself. I had to raise my hand, go after opportunities. So I ended up raising my hand, running that school newspaper, just like Rory, just like my grandmother, and ended up bringing it actually from bankruptcy to record profitability within 6 months when I stepped on, selling door to door myself alongside the very minuscule business staff that remained on the newspaper. And that became my first entrepreneurial experience and made me realize I really could be like my grandmother. I really could if I tried. And thereafter, I ended up watching another movie. This time, this one was called Legally Blonde. They just had a reunion this week. And when I saw Elle Woods succeed at Harvard in grad school, I thought to myself, maybe that's what I could do next to be like my grandmother. So ended up there, became one of their youngest students. Then thereafter, ended up working for BBC, the president of BBC, who is now the CEO of Warner Brothers, is on our board at Mogul. Then ended up working for the president of HBO, then the president of CBS. And always kept in mind during these jobs, these business jobs, what more I could learn at nights in order to develop my skill sets to start a company one day. And I realized, again, at BBC, I knew production and acquisition. With HBO, I knew distribution. With CBS, I learned strategy, business development, as I became one of their youngest executives overseeing TV stations, radio stations, websites, mobile properties across strategy. But at nights, I would take on side jobs. Second job was with the vice mayor of Beijing, creating a venture together to bridge the cultural gaps between US and China. And that was oriented around, therefore, ultimately international relations, marketing. I became the head of marketing for that venture. Then furthermore into the nights was producing feature films and documentaries with Gerard Butler, Patricia Arquette, and more, and thus was learning about production. So all of a sudden you could see that I was learning all these different skill sets, but I didn't know one final skill set, technology, coding. And so what finally happened one day, to wrap up the story, is that one day different magazines started to write about my very interesting, very varied jobs, whether that was Forbes or Business Insider. And I remember in particular, there was one morning when Forbes had published one of their first ever 30 under 30 at that time, which no one knew about. No one was following this trend at the time, but they had published one of their first lists ever of 30 under 30. They had included all these celebrities on there, and they must have run out of celebrities because they had put me in the final slot with my email by accident. And as a result, I got a flood of letters from women all around the world asking for help and advice. How did I get these jobs? How could they get the same ones too? And the same promotions, interviews. So I started to write back letters, and they would tell me my letters had changed their life. They got that interview, promotion, opportunity they never thought would be possible in their society, since I was getting letters from all around the world. And that's what gave me the idea for Mogul. What if we had a platform whereby millions of us could share our goals and dreams and aspirations and help each other through information, opportunities? And I realized I didn't know how to code and build this. I didn't have money either to hire others to build this, but I thought maybe then, therefore, the one final thing I could do was teach myself how to code and help out all these girls myself, build out this idea I had in my head. And so every single day I had all my 3 jobs, and then at nights I would pull out a PDF online that I had been told about by my brother, who is a wonderful coding prodigy, and he told me about this PDF, and it was called Ruby on Rails Tutorial by Michael Hartle. And every single night for a couple of weeks, I would try to get through chapter 1 on what software to download. I couldn't get through it. It was so difficult for me. I almost gave up so many times. I know that sounds ridiculous now, but I did. And then ultimately thereafter, I finally got through chapter 1 of what software to download and flew through chapter 2 through 10. And it was amazing just getting through. all the different chapters and learning how to code. And after a couple of weeks, the first 6 weeks, having built the first ever iteration of Mogul, very, very ugly iteration of Mogul, but I was proud of it. It was mine. I built it from my own two hands, sent it off to all the thousands of young women following me online. And then we ended up exploding to millions of women, minorities, people of color all around the world, becoming the largest now and fastest growing platform for diverse talent ever. So that's the story of how I became from business person to engineering talent thereafter.
Great. Thank you, Tiffany. It's really amazing to hear about your kind of non-traditional career path. And I think that's really changing with the millennial generation, right? Our careers are no longer straight and linear, right? You go to school for one thing, you graduate, you work for 28 years in the same field, right? I love that we're all raising our hand, we're going after these opportunities, and we're like making the world a better place for the next generation. It's really also exciting to see that the next generation, Gen Z, has such an entrepreneurial mindset. And I'm always impressed to see people who are movers and shakers on social media. I think Gen Z really has the power to shape our future as they enter the workforce and continue growing their impact. So Tiffany Zong, tell us about some of the work that you do with Zebra IQ. How do you empower young entrepreneurs to build their own businesses? What are some secrets to success that you can share?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Zebra IQ, we're essentially helping these next generation of creators with the fact that everyone is now a content creator, whether or not you accept it or not, whether or not you see yourself as an influencer, everyone is a micro influencer at least. You're influencing your local community, you're influencing your followers, you're influencing people in your area or people in a specific niche that you're focusing on and more. And so essentially for Zebra, we realize that there's millions and millions of new creators being minted every single year across all these platforms, from Instagram to TikTok to Twitch, YouTube, etc. How can they turn their passions and their interests into a real business? How can they do this full time if it is something that they're truly interested in doing? And how can they get free from the typical corporate 9-to-5 job by actually spending time creating content, connecting with their fans, building a real community around whatever their focus and interests are? And so that's essentially what our platform is doing, which is really scaling up the creator economy and helping creators monetize online, helping creators figure out who are their super fans and build a community and build a business around them. Because you only need 1,000 super fans, which anyone can get, to turn that into a 6-figure business annually, minimum. And so you don't need 10 million followers. You don't need 1 million followers. You just need 1,000 super fans paying you $10 a month. And that's already a really sustainable revenue stream for you. And so that's what our platform is doing. The way I got into this was when I was in high school. I actually started a platform, a media company focused on surfacing new music, tech, artists, etc. Like we found the Chainsmokers when they were still SoundCloud DJs and before their song Selfie blew up. And so have always been interested in understanding the creator, influencer, celebrity side of things, but how can we help all of these current day celebrities and future celebrities not go broke and have a much longer shelf life, of extending from 1 year shelf life to a 10-year shelf life. And over the last kind of 8 years of when I started the company in high school, we've just been spending a lot of time seeing how this creator economy has grown over the last few years. So that's really the background around Zebra. Secrets to success of going from creator to entrepreneur is really, you just have to put the time in, you have to be consistent, but not enough people think about how they need to really engage with their fans, because that's all that matters. If you have 1,000 followers on Instagram, engage with everyone who messages you or replies to your posts. And that's kind of how you start building up that super fan base. And that's really all that matters.
Thanks, Tiffany. As an Asian American woman working in tech with a STEM degree, I faced a number of stereotypes and challenges in professional environments. both due to my race as well as my age. Early in my career, I worked on our digital M&A team, similar to kind of corporate venture capital. And I remember being asked at an investment banking conference if I was in HR or marketing, as if I couldn't be in anything else. So as tough as it is to be a female entrepreneur, it's even tougher to find female venture capitalists. And I'm so excited that we have two of them here with us today. So first, Tiffany Zong, can you share what it was like to have been the youngest VC in the world? How did you overcome challenges in your path to growing Pineapple Capital?
So some background around how I got into VC in the first place, which is probably a question that everyone is thinking, is when I was in high school, I started using Twitter as a way to ask important, successful people questions. I didn't know anything about cold emailing, actually. It was just the most natural medium for me to use because I was like, okay, everyone's using Twitter. It seems like they're replying to people really easily, more frequently than Instagram. Now, how can I use this as a way to reach the people who I have questions for? And so I just started asking people questions consistently every other day without also coming off as super annoying. I would only continuously do that if they responded. And so I would pick up these different types of engagement points to understand like how they were actually responding to me and how to develop actually my emotional intelligence through Twitter, ironically, because it's not face-to-face. But that is really how I think that I built up my EQ from a young age. And from there, I started asking investors questions, why they thought a certain way, why they invested in a certain company, why they thought founders should do X and not Y, etc. And after that, I also started asking questions to entrepreneurs and more people in the tech world. And people realized that I was this random young kid on the internet asking these very important people questions, but also sharing what I was seeing, observations, insights from my school that I was seeing in school, just like people my age. And I was like 16 at that time when I started using Twitter. And so a lot of VCs were open to chatting with me just because I could share that interesting perspective from a Gen Z's point of view. Every meeting that I took or every DM that I sent, I always thought about how I could help this other person, how I could bring value to this person's life, even if they were much more successful than me. What I had that they didn't have was my perspective. And this is something that everyone should think about, which is you might think that you have nothing to offer to others, but you do, whether or not you know it. Just figure out what that is that you can offer and try to offer people who you want to learn from or people who you want to mentor you before you try to take something from them. And that's always been my thesis, which is always give before taking, and has helped me kind of get into venture, start a company, build my network, and more. And so from there, I ended up meeting a couple VCs who initially I first started off as a scout, just sending interesting companies that I was seeing, that my friends were using, cool apps that I was playing with. And this was my senior year of high school. From there, after a few months of doing that, they wanted me to join full-time right after high school. Initially, I was like, is this like a joke? Is this a prank? This can't be real because this is like a job that's for people 10 years my senior, and I was 17, 18 at that time. And so I just didn't think it was like serious, but then they were actually being very serious about it, being like, we're in our late 30s, early 40s, we don't have a good grasp on this next generation. And you seem to be able to bridge the gap between all the different generations and be able to articulate what are the interesting trends and insights that are popping up as it related to Gen Z. And so that's kind of how I got into the venture world. And then what it was like being the youngest VC was definitely really interesting because everyone would come to me asking me all sorts of questions around teens and Gen Zs, thinking that I had the answers to everything, which I don't. That's really what led me to start Zebra IQ because initially I was like, how do I productize myself into a company to bridge the gaps between millennials, Gen Xs, and Gen Zs? And so it seems like there's a huge gap between Gen Zs and everyone else. And so how can I bridge that gap and help people understand this generation better? And so yeah, that's really kind of how I got into venture and my venture experience. The only tip I have for people who are trying to get into venture is to figure out how you can add value to these VCs' lives, whether it's by showing them interesting companies, bringing in different perspectives and thoughts and insights to these companies, whether it's new or old. And so, and to go into these rooms with a lot of confidence. That is the only pro tip I have.
I think that's so powerful, right? The fact that you use Twitter as a platform just to reach out and ask questions directly. And that's another thing that's a key difference about this millennial Gen Z mindset, right? You're not emailing someone, scheduling time on their calendar, and then like walking into the meeting, but you're actually reaching out to them directly with the confidence and with that perspective and bringing that value to the table, which is really cool. So Tiffany Pham, can you share a little bit about what motivated you to become a VC? What advice would you give to young Asian women who are seeking funding for their businesses, their new startup ideas?
Well, I could definitely teach a whole class for a couple hours with all the tips and strategies since I've been through it for so many years. But that's actually what led me to become a VC as well, which was that after ultimately raising over many years for Mogul and ultimately having grown a profitable business that's cash flow positive and doing well, I started to realize that, that I had an understanding, of course, from the operations side, but I never thought of myself as a potential investor. This is always the other side. I was always the operator, the leader, the CEO, never the investor. And again, it wasn't me, I thought it was always going to be the other person I was going to be speaking with, my counterpart. And then over the years, Mogul had raised from incredible investors and are now, count amazing investors alongside us as friends, wonderful relationships that we still have to this day. Our investors at Hearst Corporation, a CVC, one of the world's largest investors in the world is actually an investor in Mogul as well, SoftBank. We're one of the first female founders I've ever invested in. After all these investors and learning their processes and due diligence and how they operate, I started to realize maybe actually I understood what they were doing too. And I actually could do what my counterpart was doing all this time. But I never actually thought I could do it now. I always thought it was going to be what I graduated to perhaps maybe 20 years from now, 30 years from now, maybe at some point I'll establish a VC firm at some point. So what happened though, that was like kind of that funny moment that sounds so funny to talk about now, but was just supposed to be a humorous moment, inspired me to become a VC. What happened was I was on LinkedIn and someone had posted a funny post, and the funny post was the first line, the difficulty of being an investor, : and it had a score, and it was 9. So I was like, oh, 9 out of 10, that's pretty hard. So, I figured 9 out of 10, that sounds right. But then it had all this blank space beneath the post so that you were supposed to click read more so that it would flip open and then you could see the rest of the post. And so I did that. I clicked open read more. And then it said the difficulty of being an entrepreneur, 99. And then that's when I realized this was out of 100. And the point of the post was that it was so difficult to be an entrepreneur and not as difficult to be a VC. And, to obviously have the criticisms and the constructive feedback that a VC can give without having known what it is to be an operator themselves. That was the point of the post. I'm not saying I agree with it or whatsoever, but the thing is that it did get me thinking, wait a second, Entrepreneur 99, I've been doing this job for almost a decade, and VC 9. And that made me realize, wait, I could start this firm now. And so what happened was that then, as a result, spoke internally, spoke with our lawyers, spoke with a number of different stakeholders, and realized we had enough capital within Mogul to make a $10 million commitment, capital commitment to a VC arm, just to start with, potentially up to $50 million. And ultimately, as a result, start the VC arm Mogul Global Fund that would invest into diverse founders and entrepreneurs that are creating businesses with the same aligned mission as Mogul, which is to unlock the world's greatest potential. So to be industry agnostic, to invest pre-seed, seed, but again, to invest towards the same mission and scale our mission as a result of being able to invest into other founders. So that's how this all started. And so as a result, now it's kind of a pinch me moment to realize now I am not only an entrepreneur, but a VC, which I, again, never thought would be the case simultaneously. And I'm really excited to now be able to invest into others. But in terms of advice of how to raise capital, a wonderful friend of mine who ran Techstars for a number of years once gave me a piece of advice that I'll repeat back now, which was to beg angels and then go to the VCs, because then you have like a lot of momentum built up, and then you can go into a VC who is less likely to write you a check as your first check unless you're really, good at your pitch and you have a lot of traction across your platform or revenues. So already, you want to be going to a more friendly party, go strategically towards angels, contact them in the same approach that Tiffany Zong just shared. That's also my approach to give, and never expect to take. But ultimately, if you offer a give, such as you want to meet with them, an angel, in order to find a way to collaborate with them, support them in their own initiatives, perhaps end up taking the meeting with you much more likely than if you didn't offer any give. And in that meeting, establish a relationship, a friendship. And if the discussion does come to an opportunity to share more about your business and where it's at, which it inevitably will, then you can make the ask. Make the ask, land with several angels who are aligned in your industry, have ultimately invested into your space, hopefully non-competitors, ideally non-competitors. And then thereafter, again, once you've landed some angels, then strategically figure out which VCs are aligned in the space as well, are deeply believers in your mission, and ultimately have not, again, invested in your competitors, but you believe from the outside with your research, invest in your specific industry and your space, would be interested in your mission, et cetera. So then contact them, and then all of a sudden you have a round. So it's a lot more complicated than that, of course, but that's a high overarching overview, and hopefully some of those gems will be helpful to those listening today.
Thanks for that quick rundown, Tiffany. So once you have funding secured, then you have to continue to grow and expand your business. Angie, would you be able to share with us what's the secret to successfully building your own business? How did you approach having a side project, and when do you know was the right moment to shift from having that be your side hustle to your primary focus?
So in my case, I always feel like I would, if I have an idea, I will just talk to people about it and start to like mobilize the team. So I would not code it myself. I would find a friend who wanted to learn Ruby on Rails, for example, a friendly person and just bring together the great team and make it your fun project that you really learn to articulate your vision and your mission and your product, and practice getting everyone really excited about it, and then build it on the side. For myself, I always like to do things. I don't know. I didn't have a problem running Women 2.0 on the side for 6 years at all. I think it was really fun. I still had my own personal life, and I could do my day job and run this on the side. So, but if you want to know when is the right time to quit your job and do something full-time, I think getting funding or feeling really confident in your product is a good one. But I think always just having side projects is a good thing. I don't know if it's here in the Silicon Valley that we always feel like there's plenty of time to multitask and do things and try new things. I actually learned about the idea of like throwing things out every month and seeing if they stick through some friends who are like, every month we should just throw something out there and see, put out that Ruby on Rails website and see if it goes anywhere. And then they do a lot of testing around that. And then I think it takes so much encouragement and learning and feedback. It took me like a year initially to go from, I'm just an engineer. Then people would tell me, oh, you're smart. You went to UC Berkeley. You can do this. You can get funding just like me. And I was like, it took me 1 year of being encouraged and actively pushed and by great mentors to get to that place where I was like, I'm going to pitch to VCs. So I think it takes time for sure. And I think it takes just having that team around you of encouragement. And I think this is a great opportunity for people to be allies and advocates, to join people's teams, to offer help, to be like, I want to be on your team. How can I sign up for your beta? How can I be a part of your, just like name your expertise, put it there, and just be a part of that forward momentum so that, that company can take off and you can all quit your jobs.
Thanks, Angie. Speaking of having allies and advocates around you, there's a question from the audience. So the question is, my wife has a business idea that I think would be awesome. As our #1 fan, any advice on how I, the husband as an ally or an advocate, can encourage her to start and not wait for conditions to be perfect?
So I find that one good way to get an entrepreneur to get on their own rocket ship is to hear the pitches of other entrepreneurs who have raised funding. Because you will find yourself going, oh my God, that company, those ding dongs are going to make it. And you're like, I can do it too. And I think that's what I've heard from many women entrepreneurs who have raised venture capital. Like, I was sitting in a panel and I was like, that guy just raised money for that. And then you're like, it inspires off that competitive spirit we know we have. So just, I think being in the place to hear those stories, you can go to a lot of venture capital type events. There's also, I think Startup School by Y Combinator is a really great place. Places like, I think MIT has a startup boot camp, all these one-day programs that just cycle in a ton of entrepreneurs in front of you, and you can just be inspired and learn from them and then be motivated by them to start and be successful in your own thing.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, raising funding can be the biggest challenge for new entrepreneurs, and it's a major reason why a lot of startups never get off the ground. Tiffany Zong, from your perspective as a VC, what are some tips that you can share specifically for Asian American women as they navigate how to fundraise from older white male investors?
Yeah, so the advice that I would share would be don't go into fundraising putting investors on a pedestal. That is probably the biggest perspective shift that founders don't really think about, which is they put investors on a pedestal. They think that they're just asking them for money, and they're going into meeting after meeting asking for money. You're not going into the meeting asking for money. You're going into the meeting seeking a partnership. This goes both ways. And so you're vetting them just as much as they are vetting you. And go into these meetings with that kind of perspective. It will change how you approach these meetings. It will change how you set up these pitches because you're in a completely different mind frame. And so go into these rooms with the confidence that you deserve the funding and that these investors would be lucky to be involved in your company and to be on your cap table. And to be an investor because you're building $1 billion company. That's how you should think about it when you're going in and trying to fundraise from these older white male investors who are getting pitched left and right from both female and males. And so a lot of white guys will go into these meetings with full confidence that they probably don't deserve. And I would encourage women to do the exact same thing because that is how we're going to get more funding and how we're going to get more money from these industries that are typically skewed towards males instead of women. And so that's kind of my perspective. And then fundraising, ultimately, you just think about it as storytelling. Don't think of it as like you're trying to get money. Think of it as you're telling a story and you are seeing if this person is a good fit to be part of this journey with you. Outside of just VCs, don't think of VCs as your only path to building a startup. There's a lot of ways to growing a startup. There's even more and more resources in this day and age, and there's a lot more people building these like indie hacker companies as well, which is like, then you get your freedom. Once you raise money, there's also just more pressure that comes with it because investors expect you to build a $500 million company, a $1 billion company, depending on how big their fund is. So they have these incentives to have you burn money and grow as fast as possible, which is why we see all these stories in the news of companies that either make it or break it. You're either burning $500 million and you become the next unicorn, or you're burning that much money and you don't, right? And so think about how you can build companies so that it's profitable from day one, and think about how you can build your company as community first as opposed to tech first, because community is how you're going to build an arbitrage these days as opposed to just building tech. Tech is a lot more commoditized these days, in my opinion.
Thanks, Tiffany. I love what you're saying about storytelling and confidence. I think those are two really critical success factors. And it's definitely a key difference that I see even at Accenture when I have young women who are analysts approach me. They are interested in getting into more digital, more strategy, more innovation stuff. And they ask, how can I build the skills or how can I get in there? Whereas when young men who are analysts reach out to me and ask the exact same question, they come to me and they tell me that like, I'm ready to go work in digital, or I'm super into innovation and here is why. And they just position their story and then they kind of go after it. And that's one thing that I would really encourage young Asian women to do as well. So thank you for sharing your perspective on that. Tiffany Pham, there's another question for you from the audience. So you mentioned your plethora of work experiences, which kind of helped build that foundation for you to create your business. For some of the folks in the audience who might be more recent grads that are interested in entrepreneurship, what are your thoughts? Would you recommend going into industry first or just starting a business immediately?
That's a good question, and I think it depends on the business idea. If I hadn't answered that way and said it depends on the business idea, though, my preference, my gut instinct would always be to answer to ultimately get some level of experience in general, because it does end up serving you so well compared to entrepreneurs that start out right away and don't have that business experience, if especially that business idea isn't one that just naturally ends up having that, incredible growth off of the idea concept alone, having such incredible product market fit. Then instead, if the idea is one that is reliant on a really strong entrepreneur, a really strong founder, really strong experience, really strong team, really strong, execution, that industry experience will be crucial. So I don't mean to say that you need decades of experience. I just need even 1 to 2 years experience somewhere, understanding how business runs, what contracts look like, how legal works, operation works. Just a small, just inkling of kind of how everything operates together is even enough to understand what works in a business and what doesn't. And I found that was so helpful for me. There's lessons I took away from each, which I could share now, but maybe might help whoever asked understand what they should look for, perhaps, if they do end up taking 1 to 2 years of experience before they go and start their business. Which, by the way, they can always start now on the side without going in full time. So I think that's also an alternative scenario. But what I learned from my experiences, for example, when I did for a very small amount of time, a couple of years, work in investment banking, whether that was an internship or shortly after full time after college, what I learned from there was ultimate discipline, incredible discipline, and ultimately, incredible skill sets that I still carry with me to this day of formatting, presentations, and, storytelling and financial modeling. These are little things that, while I don't do it day to day now because I have a team member for every function now, and I don't do any of kind of that more granular work, at the same time, it helped me to understand from the ground up initially how to do it myself, so that then I could source the right talent for it later on as we scaled. And we could end up growing a really strong foundation and infrastructure because of that. Later on, when I moved into, different jobs, whether, again, that was with a CBS or HBO or BBC, from there, I'm not even meaning to say that I picked up skill sets as much as I learned, again, how a business operated, how the reporting structure looks like, what not to do to create a good culture, what to do to create a good culture, which actually ends up becoming one of the most powerful things you can learn from an existing business or working there for your own, because culture and team building will become one of the most crucial things you do as a founder once you get all the operations down and the business built and product built. So anyways, I do find experience to be valuable, a little bit at least, before you start your own business, unless the business idea is one that should absolutely take off right now. To each his own, ultimately in their journey. But that's my advice.
Thanks, Tiffany. I would absolutely agree. I mean, I think that what you're saying about at least 1 to 2 years of general business and industry experience can make a huge difference. At Accenture, I see a lot of people who have ideas spark, maybe based on just something they see at their client or on their current project, or they're putting together thoughts for a hackathon. And then all of a sudden, 6 months later, 9 months later, I'm getting an email saying, farewell, I'm headed off to Techstars or whatever. So, it happens, right? It could happen to anyone, and just launching that idea. So we're running a little short on time. I'm going to do one last question, and then we'll switch over to the fleet performance. So there's a question from the audience related specifically to immigrants. So for the panel here, what tips would you have for immigrants who maybe don't have the same kind of educational pedigree from Yale or from UC Berkeley into how they can get into more entrepreneurship and launching their own business.
My first thought to this one was perhaps you didn't go to a institution, but maybe someone that you put on your founding team did, and then you could just point to them, and then you can get that pedigree. You can also do what lots of people in the Silicon Valley do, which is work at a big company for the name recognition later. You could be like X Google, X Twitter, X Facebook, and then suddenly everyone's like, okay. So that's how another way people build their credibility without having to go to a four-year institution.
That's great advice for sure, to point to someone else on your team or to have that experience from a brand name company. But, something I think powerful to also share is that while I know you named, like, what if you didn't go to Yale or Harvard, et cetera, which is where I attended. To be honest, I never mentioned Yale or Harvard in any of my pitches or conversations. And sometimes I only had one conversation with an investor or a potential executive who was buying my product or service, or a community member. We have so many different types of stakeholders at Mobile, externally, internally, and then all the different types of people we serve externally, B2B, B2C. So there's a lot of different stakeholders that I could talk to, pitch to, and half the time they don't know my background, and half the time, therefore, they don't know that I went to certain XYZ schools. But I can tell you, even when they don't, I never tell them, because it isn't important. Actually, at the end of the day, what stands is your business idea, your business, what value it's providing to the executives at the B2B community or B2C, that you're serving. And so, or the investors too, they ultimately will care more about your business, your traction, your team, overarchingly, than anything than where you went to school. I've actually even heard investors sometimes kind of laugh away those who so proudly say, like, I went to XYZ school in a pitch or something like that. So, don't worry about where you went to school or did not. At the end of the day, just if you're passionate about an idea, go all out on it, immerse yourself in those experiences at amazing internships, companies, collaborations, and worry about that, and ultimately build out your business and stand on its foundation and importance and values, and you'll succeed.
So Angie, Tiffany, and Tiffany, thank you all for sharing your stories and insights to inspire the next generation to step up, be brave, and launch their own startups. As we wrap up, I'm going to transition now to Kazuko for a flute performance. And for the audience, we invite you to keep putting in your questions in the Q&A. And then Angie, Tiffany, if you wouldn't mind going through Q&A and helping to address some of those questions. So Kazuko, over to you.
Hi. Hello, everyone. I'm going to perform today Lucien Devon, The Song of the Wind by Dungeon, and Tango Etude number 3 by Astor Piazzolla.
Thank you. Thank you for the lovely flute performance. To everyone on the webinar, thank you all for attending our discussion around millennial entrepreneurs and technology. We hope that you enjoyed the lively discussion. I wish we had more time to get to all of the questions. And we're looking forward to the next webinar on Wednesday, October 28th, where we will discuss the future of technology in 2025. So that's it. Thank you, everyone.